Today, March 6, 1937, I, Mark Anthony Coombs, have given a cookbook to my youngest daughter, Henrietta Coombs. Hold it sacred, Retta, as it has been the property of 3 of the noblest of women.
Henrietta McCune Coombs, one of those noble women, was born September 2nd, 1867, in Nephi, Juab County, Utah. She was the 4th child and 2nd daughter of Henry Frederick and Elizabeth Grace McCune, who were the parents of 13 children. In his journal, Henrietta's father described her as a beautiful, sweet child. It is likely she was named after her father because many of her siblings were also given family names. Henrietta's grandparents, Matthew and Sarah Elizabeth Caroline Scott McCune, had joined the LDS Church in Calcutta, India, where Matthew was stationed as a gunnery sergeant with the British Army. After gathering with the saints in Utah, they moved to Nephi about 1857 during the Utah War. Nephi was settled by a handful of pioneers in the fall of 1851 who had enthusiastically responded to Brigham Young's call to settle on Salt Creek in Juab Valley, which was located at the foot of Mount Nebo. Although the new town was often called Salt Creek, its official name was always Nephi, named in honor of the beloved Book of Mormon prophet. The settlers lived out of their wagons for 3 months before building a few houses, church, grist mill, and a small fort, and eventually a social hall. From the very beginning there was a strong sense of unity in the community, and to this day Nephi is still known as a friendly city. It was in Nephi that Henry Frederick met and married Elizabeth Grace, the daughter of Isaac and Elizabeth Williams Grace, who were among Nephi's first settlers. Henry Frederick built his bride a sturdy adobe home with a stone foundation that he quarried himself from Nephi Canyon. The home, surrounded by the homes of other family members, was located on the northeast corner of 4th East and 1st South in Nephi. Henry Frederick and Elizabeth were kind and loving parents who raised their children in a house of prayer, a house of fasting, a house of faith, a house of learning, a house of order, a house of God. The McCune home was also always filled with laughter and music. As a girl, Henrietta most likely attended school in the Nephi Social Hall, also known as the Juab Stake Academy. She was evidently a promising student, because during her teenage years, her millionaire uncle, Alfred William McCune, was so impressed with her academic achievements that he offered to pay all of her expenses to a prestigious school in the East. Her parents, concerned that if Henrietta left Utah, she would marry a non-member, suggested instead that she attend Brigham Young Academy in Provo, but her uncle insisted she enroll in his choice of schools or none. Of all of her sisters, Henrietta was the most like her mother in appearance and temperament. She was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, but her spiritual strength, coupled with her good humor and quick wit, had enormous impact on everyone she met. In June 1884, when Henrietta was 17 years old, her parents began building a large addition on the west side of their home. They had only worked on the project a few weeks before Henry Frederick was called on an 18-month mission to India and New Zealand. 2 of the boys helped their mother to make adobe bricks to finish the construction, and by the time their father returned, the project was completed. The girls also did what they could to assist their mother. Henrietta and her sister Florence helped with the housekeeping. Grace worked in a millinery shop and contributed to her income for family necessities. Members of the ward and other townspeople also helped the family by providing flour and other staples. The McCunes, although not wealthy, lived comfortably. Their home had lovely furniture and a carpet in the parlor purchased by Elizabeth from the legacy she received from her father's estate. There was a large window in the dining room where there were geraniums, calla lilies, and fuchsias. Henry Frederick was very progressive, and his home was the first residence in Nephi to have culinary water piped in, as well as the first to have electric lights. Henrietta and her siblings often invited their friends to their home, where they enjoyed playing games as well as singing hymns and popular songs of the day. They were all musically talented, a trait they inherited from their father, who was one of the founders of the highly esteemed Nephi brass band. Henrietta was particularly gifted on the piano, and she could play the chords for any song the family members desired to sing. According to Henrietta's sister Leah, they were also all excellent dancers, and they regularly attended the numerous church and town dances held in Nephi. Henrietta first met her future husband Mark Anthony Coombs at one of these dances in the fall of 1888. Later that same season, she encountered him again at the leap year ball. Mark Anthony, who was born and raised in the neighboring town of Payson, Utah, was the son of Isaiah Moses and Fanny McCune Coombs. Both of his parents had died by the time Mark Anthony was 18, and he had to make his own way in the world. In the spring of 1889, Mark Anthony Coombs accepted a position with the J.C. Osler & Sons harness shop in Nephi. He later recalled,
It was a short time after my arrival in Nephi that I had the pleasure of renewing my acquaintance with Henrietta McCune. Our acquaintance soon resulted in my making friendly calls on her, and later in asking for her company. I may say I found in Miss McCune my ideal for a wife and continued my attention to her with that in view. In the month of September 1889, I asked for and received her consent to be my wife for time and all eternity.
A local newspaper which announced the couple's upcoming marriage described Miss Eddie McCune as an accomplished young woman. Henrietta and Mark Anthony were married on March 5, 1890 in the Manti Temple, with Daniel H. Wells officiating. Henrietta was a beautiful bride in her delicate dress of white Swiss muslin, surmounted with an elegant sash of watered silk, dotted with orange blossoms. She also wore flowers in her luxurious brown hair. The next evening, Henry, Frederick, and Elizabeth hosted a wedding reception for the couple at their home. There was a large circle of guests present, and at 5 o'clock the company sat down to a feast fit for the gods. Well-wishers gave them many beautiful gifts that included a Brussels carpet, silver tea set, jewelry, vases, pitcher, glasses, and a sewing machine. Mark Anthony later wrote about his marriage.
I have never regretted the step I took then. She has been and is a kind, loving, and affectionate wife. May God grant that her life may be prolonged on the earth as long as it is desirable to her, and to be a joy and comfort to me, and to our dear children, and all whom she is associated with.
The couple first lived in Provo and then returned to Nephi, where Mark Anthony resumed his employment at the Osler Harness Shop. Their two oldest children, Mark Vernon, known as Mernon, and Fanny Elizabeth, known as Beth, were born in Nephi. During the Panic of 1893, Mark Anthony was laid off from his work, and when he could not find other employment, Henrietta's uncle, Alfred William McCune, hired him as a streetcar motorman in Salt Lake City. The couple's third child, Alma, was born there in 1896. The family moved to Payson in 1899, where Mark Anthony purchased an interest in a grocery and butcher shop. Morgan Scott was born a year after their arrival. While they lived in Payson, Mark Anthony, who played the snare drum, joined the Payson Brass Band. In 1902, Mark Anthony accepted a mission call to Great Britain. To support him and his family while he was away, he sold his interest in his shop for $1,500. Henrietta, who was 5 months pregnant, and their 4 children accompanied him to the Payson train station to say goodbye. Every month, Henrietta faithfully sent her husband $15, and as their funds dwindled, she supplemented their meager income by going door to door and selling sterling silverware with polished bone handles that Mark Anthony sent her from England. Beth often stayed home from school to tend the younger children while Henrietta was away. The Coombs children later recalled that during their time the father was away, they never heard their mother complain about the heavy responsibilities that she carried alone. The couple's 5th child, Grace, was born 4 months after Mark Anthony's departure. A few weeks after her birth, Beth came home from the Petite Neat school with smallpox, and all of the children, including Grace, soon contracted the dreaded disease. Vernon and Grace were so desperately ill that Henrietta and her mother, who had come from Nephi to help her, began making plans for their burial. Mark Anthony, who somehow sensed that all was not well at home, wrote to Henrietta.
What is wrong with Vernon? I feel quite depressed.
Late one evening, there was a knock at the door. Henrietta and her mother were startled because the home had been quarantined. The unexpected visitor was a neighbor named Amasa Potter, who had prepared for bed when he heard a voice 3 separate times directing him to go and help Sister Coombs. Brother Potter rebuked the evil spirit that filled the home and gave Henrietta and each of her children a priesthood blessing. By morning, the children had broken out in blisters. Their fevers were gone, and they on their way to recovery. The family's narrow escape from death was a direct answer to Henrietta's constant prayers for her children.
I often pleaded with the Lord that I would never experience the devastating sorrow of losing one of my children during my lifetime or even in the next life.
When Mark Anthony returned from his mission in 1904, he resumed his trade as a harness maker, but wages were extremely low. After attending a church conference and hearing that there were numerous opportunities in Canada, he and Henrietta decided to move. Mark Anthony borrowed $50 and then traveled to southern Alberta, where he found employment in a harness shop in Raymond. However, after receiving inspiration from the Doctrine and Covenants, "Ye shall go west, and then it shall be made known unto you what ye shall do," he decided his family should settle in Cardston, which was west of Raymond. It was extremely difficult for Henrietta to leave most of her beloved family and friends in Utah and move to an unfamiliar country. She had the overwhelming responsibility of settling their affairs in Payson, borrowing an additional $200 from the bank, and transporting herself and the children, with the exception of 12-year-old Vernon, who had gone ahead of them alone by train to Canada. When they finally arrived, they were devastated to discover that someone had stolen all of their furniture in China. The loss of the beautiful gifts the couple had received at their wedding must have been especially difficult for Henrietta. Mark Anthony and Henrietta moved into a small house on the west end of town, and then to another home where they lived from 1904 to 1910. Shortly after they moved into this home, the family discovered it was infested by bedbugs. 2 more daughters, Ida and Ruth, were born in this home. The Canadian short summers and long, harsh winters were another trial for the family. In Nephi and Payson, they had enjoyed fresh fruit from their orchards, but in Canada, the growing season was so short, they had to be satisfied with dried or bottled fruit. On one occasion, Henrietta, who was suffering from homesickness, wrote a letter to her mother in Nephi complaining about the bitter cold.
I wrote that it was 40 degrees below zero, and then I was interrupted before I could finish the letter. When I resumed writing, a chinook or warm wind had swept through the town, dramatically rising the temperature and melting the snow. Mother must have thought my brain had been affected by the cold when I told her that it was now a balmy 40 degrees, and that everyone on the street was opening up their coats.
For a while, Eddie and I allowed ourselves to become discouraged and to wonder at times if we had made a mistake in moving to Canada. However, the warm welcome we received from the people there soon convinced us that we had made the right decision.
The Coombs soon learned to love the gentle rolling hills and green pastures of the prairie and the silhouettes of the nearby mountains. Mark Anthony obtained a $500 line of credit from the Great Western Saddlery Company in Calgary and opened a harness shop in Cardston. His business did so well that he quickly paid back all of the money they had borrowed. In 1910, the family moved temporarily to another home, but by 1911, Mark Anthony had prospered to the extent that he was able to build a 2-story stone and brick store and move his family into a lovely new home. The home, which cost $9,000, was located at 164 2nd Avenue. The couple's last child, Henrietta, who Alma nicknamed Retta, was born in this home. The family quickly established themselves as valuable members of the community. Mark Anthony was called as a counselor in the bishopric, and he also served in the high priest quorum leadership as well as on the town council and the school board. He was responsible for Cardston's first cement sidewalks and water system, as well as the first brick schoolhouse.
Hi, my name is Lloyd Curl. One of my favorite grandfathers, who I've never met, is Mark Anthony Coombs, who was born in 1868. 1904, moved to Canada. We lived just outside of Cardston. He moved to Cardston in 1904, and he loved the place and stayed there the rest of his life. In 1944, I was asked to comment on the fact that he was active in civic life. There's a picture of him in 1911 on the Cardston Town Council. In 1929, he was a founding member of Rotary in the Cardston area. He became president of Rotary in 1931, so he's very active in civic activities, try to help out that way, even more so, or just as much so, in the temple is dedicated, Cardston Temple, in 1923. You see a picture of him with Henrietta as some of the first temple workers, and they were temple workers for the rest of their lives. So that's how they did it back then. And what I'm particularly impressed about Mark Anthony Coombs was I remember talking to my mother once, and what she really loved about him was that there was never a crossword between father and mother, and that he just thought his wife was just what's the word he used? The cutest thing that ever happened. That's how he described Henrietta. He just loved her to death, and I admire her for that. Thank you very much.
Henrietta was extremely busy raising her family and caring for her lovely home. She often took in boarders to supplement their income. Although she rose early every day, her family never saw her undressed or her hair uncombed. The Coombs home soon became the social center of Cardston. Retta recalled the family had more parties than everyone else in town. Alma noted any time the church or any other organization wanted a place for entertainment, our home was available. One of Henrietta's greatest enjoyments was singing, and she was a member of the ward choir during all of the years she lived in Cardston. She had a velvety alto voice, and she frequently sang duets with Mark Anthony, who was an excellent bass. Henrietta also sang with her sister Grace McCune, who had a beautiful soprano voice. Mark Anthony and Henrietta made great sacrifices to allow their children to have musical training. Every summer, Mark Anthony and Henrietta would take the family camping at Waterton Park, which was approximately 30 miles from Cardston. Another family activity they enjoyed was packing a lunch and driving to the river bridge, which was on the St. Mary's River 3 miles west of Cardston. Shortly before World War I, Henrietta was called as the Relief Society president in her ward. She served in this calling throughout the war and during the devastating Spanish flu epidemic of 1918 and 1919. The flu killed more than 21 million people throughout the world, and 50,000 of those who died were Canadians. Countless children were made orphans, numerous widows were left without support, and many fathers had no one to tend their children while they worked. As Relief Society president, it was Henrietta's responsibility to visit the sick and wounded, to prepare the dead for burial, and to comfort and provide assistance to those who had lost loved ones. Henrietta's dedication to her calling took a heavy toll on her, and she eventually collapsed from a combination of exhaustion and the flu. When she was released as the Relief Society president, the sisters in the ward paid her a lovely tribute.
Sister Coombs filled the position of Mother of the Ward very credibly, thus making a place in the hearts of the brethren and sisters that can never be effaced. She is an honorable woman, a saint indeed, an elect lady chosen to lead, to nurse the sick in body and in mind, an example of modesty, virtue, and truly thoughtful of others, with a pure heart and mind, always sharing her rare gifts and powers. May God bless and prosper this dear sister of ours.
Henrietta also served as primary president in the Young Ladies Mutual Improvement Association and as a member of the Relief Society Stake Board. She also was a member of Sewing Circle and a women's group that sponsored lectures on women's rights, politics, and dramatics. In addition, Henrietta and Mark Anthony served together on the Old Folks Committee, which provided local entertainment and yearly excursions to Waterton for the elderly. On August 26, 1923, the Cardston Temple was dedicated and several prominent LDS church leaders, including George Albert Smith, stayed at the Coombs home during this time. The famous LDS artist LeConte Stewart, who painted the mural in the temple's creation room, was also one of their guests. Mark Anthony and Henrietta were among the first temple workers in the sacred edifice. They often served together, but sometimes they were assigned to different shifts.
Whenever I worked the night shift, Mark would always come over to the temple to walk me home. Whatever the weather or how cold it might be, no matter what, I knew he would be there waiting for me.
Mark Anthony had been raised in a very strict home, and although he was a stern and serious man, Henrietta softened him. Their children recalled that their father was the head of the house, but their mother was the balance wheel. Henrietta's children adored her, and Morgan often said that no one had ever had a more angelic mother. Grace expressed her love for her mother in a poem.
Dearest mother in all the world, I wonder if you know just how much you mean to me and why I love you so. You are my mother, it is true, and that might be sufficient. But other reasons too I have, which are entirely different. You cared for me when I was small. You watched me as I grew. Though I did wrong, you trusted me, were friend and mother too. And when the world seemed dark to me, and I was racked with pain, you were beside me through it all, bringing sunshine after rain. And now though I am far from home, sweet messages come to me ever, and love for you in that dear home, there's naught from me can sever. And that is why, my darling mother, to me you are a treasure, truest of friends, and mother too, I love you beyond measure.
When her children grew up and moved away, Henrietta faithfully wrote them letters, continually expressing her great love for them and the desires of her heart.
I think I ought to be the happiest mother in the world to have such wonderful children and devoted husband. And I want you to know I love you all more than words can express. It is my prayer that we will always have this love for each other, for this is what brings great joy to our hearts.
Yeah,
So
you
that's
tell
good.
them when you're ready, because I have no idea.
Now, is my hair good?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I need lipstick.
You look great.
Okay. You would like me to tell about my grandma Coombs. My dad, Morgan Coombs, loved his mother more than anybody I've ever heard of. He said, no one ever had a more saintly, sweet, lovely mother than I. Truly an angel from heaven. He always called her my angel mother. He never just called her mom or mother. It was always my angel mother. One time when he was really sick, he was living away from home, teaching school some other place. I don't have this information written down, but he got real sick with the flu or something. He had to go home. And he says, I was sorry I had the flu, but I was so thankful to be with my angel mother again. She really took good care of me and helped me get better. So my dad said that Sundays were the days he loved the best. The family all went to church, Sunday school in the morning and sacrament meeting in the afternoon. He said, I don't believe a Sunday passed by in the summers that I didn't have to go get ice and freeze ice cream. This I hated, but how we did enjoy Mother's meals. She was a marvelous cook, and we always had someone to dinner on every Sunday. We had many joyous times on Sunday. Okay, my dad said there's never been any doubt in our family from the beginning about the existence of God. This we learned at my mother's knee. Faith was a substance as real as our bread and butter. And I'm sure that's how my dad was taught and trained, and why he was such a good man, because of his mother and his father. He loved his dad all too very, very much. Gave him all the credit for being what he was. And I'm very, very grateful to be a member of the Coombs family. When we got married, I was told that I needed to sign my name Shirley Peterson. I said, no way, I will be Shirley Coombs Peterson forevermore. And I'm very, very grateful for that inheritance that I got from my parents. I love them, and I love all the people that I know in the Coombs family are the greatest, and also the McCunes. There's something about the love that everybody has for each other that will never go away, and I'm very thankful and hope that I will be able to see everybody in the next life. If I'm not here, I'm like my dad. If you're not there, I don't want to be there. Then my dad in his journal said, "Please forgive me if I record here that no one ever had a more angelic, devoted, loving mother than I. She was only 67 years old and should have lived another 15 years. Now as I'm getting older, I catch myself longing for the day on occasions when I can see my dad and mother again. If they are not in the celestial kingdom, I don't want to go there." Those are some of the memories that my dad had of his angel mother. So if she was his angel mother, she was my angel grandmother and my kid's angel great-grandmother. She was very special, and we always look at the pictures we have of her. But we will be looking forward to meeting her again too, if we get that high up where she is. I say this. Okay, who's going to talk next?
Is it on?
You said you're going to talk. Nobody talked except me.
On September 7th, 1933, Mark Anthony and his children hosted a surprise birthday party for Henrietta at their home. The Cardston News reported that approximately 30 people were present, and that Golden and Beth Wolfe and their children, who had recently returned from France after presiding over the French mission for 3.5 years, were also honored. Social conversation, singing, especially of several songs in French, in games and contests, and witty battles made a very pleasant evening for the party. Refreshments included cake and homemade ice cream, and at the end of the evening everyone gathered around the piano to sing "God Be With You Till We Meet Again." In the fall of 1935, it was discovered that Henrietta had developed melanoma from a large mole on her leg. Mark Anthony brought her to Utah so she could receive tender care from her son Morgan, who was a doctor, and her daughter Ruth, who was a trained nurse. Despite her intense suffering, Henrietta's first thoughts were for her beloved family. Her grandson Bryce Hanson treasures a baby blanket that she made for him during this time.
Hi, I'm Bryce Hanson, the best looking and favorite son of Alma Coombs and Wilford Hanson. Please forgive me for reading this account, but in my old age I seem to be suffering from cardiomalacia and lacrimal overactivity. In other words, I'm becoming increasingly soft-hearted and can cry at the drop of a sentiment. I was born September 12th, 1935, just after Grandmother Coombs left for Salt Lake with Grandfather for treatment for a melanoma. I will tell the story as written by my mother, but before I do, try to visualize, if possible, the vehicles, the primitive roads, and the trains that were in use in 1935. Here are a few suggestions. Now in Mother's words. Father phoned, "If you want to see Mother alive, you'd better come immediately." Well, here we were with two babies. Ida with Mark, and Bryce wasn't well. It was the middle of a December winter, but we wanted to go to Mother. She had never seen Bryce. He was born just 3 days after she went down for treatment. This was the 13th day of December, and we got busy. I had 2 little girls that needed to be taken care of, so my husband arranged for his sister to take them, and within 24 hours we were on our way. I don't know how we did it. We had to fix lunch to eat on the train. There were no diners. It was going to take us 3 days by train with 2 babies and all their equipment. We didn't have Pampers in those days, only cloth diapers. Fun. We left at 9 at night with Lawrence Curl to go across the U.S.-Canadian border, but the line was closed. There was no one there at that hour. A friend, Ernest Comm, had a car, and he drove Ida and her baby and me and my baby all night long over to Browning, but the train had already left. So we drove on to Sweetgrass. We got there at 10 the next morning, and the train had gone. So we sat in a cold hotel room all day long in Sweetgrass with these 2 babies, waiting for the train to leave at 6 that night. We got on the train That would be the 14th, and arrived in Salt Lake on the morning of the 16th, just in time to see Mother. That was the first she'd seen Bryce. Bryce was just 3 months old, and Mark Woolsey just 6 weeks older. Mother died on the 17th. Sometime, probably including the time of her illness and some of its effects on her well-being, Grandmother handmade this beautiful shawl for me, which I presume was given to Mother on her arrival in Salt Lake. It is a beautiful work of love, undoubtedly for my mother, but also for a baby she had not met until the day before her passing. Over the more than the intervening 80-plus years, it has shown fewer signs of age than have I. It is a treasure, and I look forward to the day when I can hug her, express my love for her and Grandpa, and personally thank her for it. And this is the shawl which I can't show you much more detail than this, except for the following photographs. I love it.
Henrietta passed away on December 15, 1935, in Salt Lake City. She was only 67 years old. At the news of her passing, family members received numerous condolences from family and friends in both Canada and Utah. 2 funerals were held for her, one in Karsten and another in Nephi. Henrietta was praised for her beautiful home life and for being an inspiration to her friends and neighbors. She was also commended for her obedience and her faithfulness to duty, which was outstanding. Apostle Hugh B. Brown, a close family friend, recollected that there was never a time that he had not seen her with a smile. He added her motto seemed to be, "I shall not pass through this world again. If there is any good thing I can do, or any kindness that I can show any human being, let me do it now, and not defer it, for I shall not pass this way again." He consoled Mark Anthony with these words, "Brother Coombs, you and your wife have been loved by all who have known you, and your family in Canada and here have been admired. As I think of what this family has done, I thank God for my association with them. I think of Vernon out in the mission field presiding as president of the Tongan mission. I think of Beth out in France with Golden. I think of Morgan, who is now a doctor, struggling through his schooling, then realizing his success. I think of these girls, a trained nurse, a school teacher, an especially fine businesswoman. What more could you ask than that God give you such a choice family, such an unusual companion, such a wonderful wife?" Elder Brown then sought to comfort Henrietta's daughters. "Girls, look up. Don't feel despondent or to grieve unduly. Your mother's influence will be with you day and night. I speak out of experience when I tell you that our mothers, in the quiet hours of the night, come to us when we cry for them, and they are now where they can do us more good than they have ever done, and there is a definite link between God and us through them." These words have proved prophetic. Henrietta's influence, her legacy of faith, love, loyalty, courage, service, and optimism have continued to inspire and sustain her family through the years.